Welcome to this so special class with Professor Jorge Díaz Cintas. Once again, please put in mute, okay, everybody. And Professor Jorge kindly collected all the questions we have made to him beforehand, and he prepared some answers just to be straightforward to what we want to speak here. He wants to be very straightforward and direct to our questions and our concerns as Brazilian subtitlers and professionals, translation professionals in general. And before I give him the floor, the total floor of our school, I would like to introduce him to all of you. So guys, Professor Jorge Díaz Cintas has a PhD on subtitling by the University of Valencia, Spain. He's a reader in translation and the director of the Center for Translation Studies at University College London. He's the author of numerous articles and books on audiovisual translation. And he's also the president of the European Association for Studies in Screen Translation since 2002 until 2010, as is now one of its directors. He also works as a freelance translator and interpreter, and since 2010 has been the chief editor of the Peter Lang series, New Trends in Translation Studies. He's an expert board member of the ULIN Web Project. Professor George, the floor is all yours. Thank you again so much for your presence and for the presence of all our guests, students and ex-students that are here drinking of everything you have to teach us. And as I told you via email, we will never be thankful enough to have your presence here with us at our school. Professor.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and also Gilma, for the invitation. It's been a long time in the cooking and the preparing, but I am very pleased that we've managed to arrange it and to have a little bit of time with you all. It's a real pleasure. I've been to Brazil a couple of times, and I've always had a really good time there. People are very generous, very warm, and it's always a place that I relate to very closely. I'm originally, as you know, from Spain, so we share lots of things from this Latin temperament and so on. When I was invited to this, I wanted to make it a bit more personal as a proposition, as a presentation, and I wanted you to tell me what you wanted to know from me, and it was very nice to receive all these questions and be asked on particular issues. So to make sure, as Deborah was saying, that I'm not bluffing my way and that I'm only choosing some of the questions that I think more or less important, I've chosen all your questions, and there were 8. And I thought 8 was a funny number, so I've added 2 more. I did something similar for some students in Lima, in Peru, not long ago, and they asked me a couple of questions that I found very interesting, and I've just added them in here. But I will tell you as they come here. I started at the beginning thinking I'll make it very informal and very sort of talking to you, but then as I was developing the questions and thinking about them, I felt that probably a PowerPoint will help you see some of the information more clearly. I will be making references to certain projects, events, things that are happening, and it probably is easier if you see them in the PowerPoint. I've already promised to Deborah and to Gilma to send the PowerPoint, and I'm quite happy for you to distribute them. But if you want to come to me, anybody present here, if you want to a copy, you can contact me directly and I will send it to you. No problem whatsoever. With that, I will now start sharing my screen from London. You can see there to remind you of the UK somehow. And this is the PowerPoint that I have created for my talk. Okay. I've taken advantage as well to put here a new publication that just came out recently, just before Christmas, where I discussed together with a colleague lots of things that have been happening lately in subtitling. I'm gonna try to make my presentation today a little bit more general, not just subtitling, though subtitling is my main field of expertise. But I wouldn't like to be accused by Gilma that I'm forgetting dubbing, knowing that that is her main area of expertise. So I'm going to try and combine as much as I can in the field of audiovisual translation. Okay. And what I've done is, with the questions that I received from you, I've tried to cluster them in three main areas. There were some questions relating clearly to translation and the translation process and product. Then there were some questions that I felt were more aligned with translators and our daily routine and our daily lives in the industry. And then the last one, the last section, I felt that a few questions related more to the market, maybe a little bit to the technology that is being used these days. So I've tried to put them together in that way so that they sort of follow some logical thread in my presentation here. So this is the first question that someone asked here, and it was relating to untranslatable expressions, and particularly to an area that I like very much. It is some expressions in certain languages are more like a feeling than a word, a bit like profanities, for example. So do you have any tips on how to deal with such words or sentences? Should we try to find an equivalent in the target language, what we are translating for? And there was a third question within this one, which I felt it was slightly different, but I will explain now. Have you ever come across any occasions where you had to leave some words in their original language? Now, I think there are two main distinctions here. One is profanities, swear words, you know, um, the F word, which happens a lot in English dialogue in films. And we have to be careful when we are considering this area of translation, particularly in subtitling. And I've always had the feeling that expletives are much more easily conveyed through dubbing than through subtitling. And one of the reasons behind this, even though we don't have much research done on the topic, is that we think that a swear word written down is much more aggressive than when we are saying it. And even though we haven't done much testing, much testing on this, and actually there was somebody from Portugal, Sara Ramos, who did a little bit of research on this with Portuguese audiences, and they weren't too upset by reading swear words on the screen. So I'm not really sure till what extent it really is true, or whether it is one of those ideas that is being conveyed in the industry for a long time, and then we continue to do that. But the reality is that there is a tendency, generally speaking, to delete this part of the dialogue. Of course, profanities, blasphemies, swear words, they cannot be understood literally. And there is, on the one hand, there is the denotative way, is what they are actually saying, what they are actually conveying. But then there is the connotation on what they actually mean, and what is the feelings, as this student is putting in their question, what is the feeling implied in there. And people use different things, or they refer to different taboo areas when they are dealing with this world. with this type of words. So you might find that, for instance, in Spanish, being in my country, being a very Catholic country, or that's what we are supposed to be, we tend to be very, very blasphemous. Whereas you don't find so many blasphemies in English when they are speaking. And they tend to be probably a little bit less creative than in some other languages, where in English, the F term, fucking, tends to appear all over the place, and it conveys lots of information, from disappointment to being really angry to feeling that you are silly and stupid, and things like that. So you need to be careful in there to see, okay, what is the denotative, what is that they're saying? Is this religious? It is sexual? It is racist? It is, what is the implications behind this type of profanity? And then look for something in your own language that is going to make sense in that context. And that probably doesn't refer to the same denotative content as the original. Have I ever come across situations where I need to keep words in a foreign language in when translating in Spanish? I have, and you find those happening, but not so much when we're talking about profanities, for example, where we're talking about feelings. But it happens a lot more when we are talking about realities that we don't seem to be able to relate to in our languages. For instance, food. You might find some dishes that they are not popular in a particular country, and there isn't much that you can change in terms of terminology. So you are, on those occasions, what you are doing is bringing in new cultures into Brazilian Portuguese, or into Spanish, or into German, and therefore you have to keep the original as such, and maybe use some sort of explanations for people to understand. But going back to the swearing and how it's dealt with, I brought you some examples. This is by no means an easy area to deal with. And then you've got different companies react and adopt different strategies. I'm sure you're familiar with Netflix. Netflix have got now these days, their guidelines are readily available on the internet, and they explicitly make a reference to this thorny issue of expletives and taboo language. And you've got it there, dialogue must never be censored. So anything that is said in the original that is blasphemous, or that is not nice to listen to, but the director has chosen to use it, then it should be rendered as faithfully as possible. And then there is no other definitions there. There is no more information there. Here in the UK, for instance, also readily available, and you've got there, I try to give you all the time the links, so if you want to investigate further. But Channel 4 is one of the independent TV channels in the UK. It's one of the largest ones in this country, and they come more or less to the same conclusion and the same uh, guidelines, that expletives should be translated as such. So you shouldn't make them lesser, of lesser strength or stronger, but you should just try to convey the same dimension there. And but if you can see here, is at the end here, better to leave it out sometimes altogether if the program is likely to be transmitted before the watershed. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the UK, the legislation or the regulations for the TV, but the watershed is a time during the day, which is 9 o'clock in the evening, when is considered to be the changing of audiences. Until 9 o'clock, children might be around, and that's when they're asking you to be careful and not to use certain terminology. From 9 o'clock in the evening, then children are supposed to be in bed, and then you can do subtitles and you can produce programs that might incorporate that sort of information. So they are a bit more cagey. They're a bit cagier than Netflix. Netflix tells you do as you please, but Channel 4, it starts giving you a little bit of guidance on when not to do it. in there. And then you can go to other extremes, like for instance Disney, and many other distributors that will give you a list of words that cannot be used in translating their content, and they will be terms referring to sexuality, to religion, to racist issues, and so on, where they just simply cannot be used in the translation. So as you can see, it varies and allows for quite a little bit of disparity in the way companies react to this sort of language. Let's move now to question number 2. Okay. I'd like to just tell you I'm following these questions, and please feel free to add any information if you want on in the chat, or at the end. I'm hoping as well we will have a little bit of time for you to ask me any questions, either clarifications of what I have addressed with your questions, or anything that I haven't mentioned here that you feel you would like me to address. So I'm more than happy. I can, if you want to talk, then that will be great, and then we can have a much more dynamic intervention there. But I would ask you to do it please in English, and if you use the chat, you can do in English, but also you can do Portuguese. I can understand it when it's written, but when it's talked, I sometimes fail to fully grasp the information. So feel free to use any language to make it, participatory for all of you.
Professor,
Yep.
please just allow me to thank you for answering the first question, which is a common doubt. And sometimes when students come to work with subtitling and translation, audiovisual translation in general, they have no idea. We have some limitations, not only of time or lip syncing or whatever, line, CPS, CPL, but we also have limitations with our vocabulary and the terms we have to use, we should never use, and it varies from channel to channel. So it was very nice to bring this issue here. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
And to contextualize a little bit, but yes, I think I'm afraid you need to, as a translator, and if you're going to be working freelancing, then you're going to have many clients. And
Yes,
clients will be all different, and they will have
yes.
different prerequisites, the same as, different supermarkets sell you different
Mm-hmm.
products, and different shops sell you different clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have their own likes and dislikes,
Yeah,
and they will be sometimes giving you advice on how to do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah. Jorge.
Jorge, I'm sorry. Until
No,
the end
that's
of our,
fine.
yeah, until the end of our special class, I'll be accustomed to call you Jorge, I promise.
Okay, good. So, question number 2 here. For me, the best part of translation is diving into a new culture to try to understand how we can express ourselves better in language for that specific culture. What is the moment where you have the most fun when it comes to audiovisual translation? Um, I think I totally and utterly agree with this comment and the approach of this person. This idea that you are bringing some sort of enjoyment, usually when you're dealing with entertainment, but we know that audiovisual translation now is much more than just films. I've developed quite a lot of interest, for instance, in activism and how people are using audiovisual translation videos with translations to fight against certain governments, to fight against certain issues, to raise visibility about the globe, the environment, and so on. So being able to be the sort of person that is orchestrating that communication, I think is amazing. And in this particular case as well, because of the reach of audiovisual translation and the importance that it might have. I've been, for instance, lately talking to people about audiovisual translation in moments of crisis, an earthquake, COVID, when it started in China, nobody knew. They did create material, it needs to be urgent. And we know that more and more people, they just want to we communicate audiovisually. We always have our mobiles and we send videos here and there. If they don't have subtitles, if they don't have dubbing or voiced over, then we're not going to get the information out very quickly. And if we continue as they were doing on some occasions with documents that are long, that are probably very detailed, but are not immediate, where then we are risking reaching the audiences and reaching the people that need the translation at one moment, at very specific moment. So that feeling of helping in between, I think, is one that I like most. More specifically, I always like dealing with humor. Sometimes I hate it because I think, I feel a bit dense and I don't know how to deal with some of the solutions, but it really unleashes your creativity and you start looking for the images and say, okay, I cannot say the same in Spanish, but if I look at the images, it might be something there that I could use in my translation and make it a little bit funny or a little bit quirky or a little bit creative if I cannot get that sort of fun in there. And that takes me away from the text as such, from the language as such, to look and scan the images and start thinking laterally on how we can get the whole program into my translation and not only the language. And this, I think, is also very unique in our field because usually in other areas, literature, poetry, you know, uh, any written documents, you usually stay at the level of the language only. And it's very difficult to just, you know, extract information from the images and the soundtrack. So I think that's one probably one of the areas that I find most rewarding, even though sometimes they can be very, very challenging as an experience. Let's move to question number 3. And taking into consideration all the criteria, rules, and limitations that we have to follow and respect when we are working in subtitling, as well as the tight deadlines that are so common in our daily work, would you have any tips on how to manage intercultural translation? And I wish I had a very sort of steadfast solution to this, because then I could probably market it and become rich and then buy a house somewhere in a nice beach, probably in Brazil, that I can go and spend there my holidays. But sadly, there isn't just one solution that it can be applied straightforward. And this is something that the industry is acutely aware. There has been, I think some of you followed my presentation the other day at Tradac, which was an event organized by some Italian universities. And the question will come later on as well. But in my understanding and my discussions with quite a few companies lately, there is a big feeling, there is an uneasy feeling in the industry that quality is not as good as they would like it to be. And sometimes there are many reasons for this, and we will discuss some of those. But one that I think the companies that complain about this could put a remedy is to work with, use the technology and use whatever is available to us now to help us as translators rather than to use it against our advantages. And I will tell you, for instance, working in this field, we have been very, very slow to use technology, like, for instance, memory tools. I'm not meaning here machine translation. I go to Google Translate, I put the text and I get a translation. But it's more a memory tool that it will be individualized, that you can have your own memories and that you could use when you've got recurrent terms that are going to be happening a lot in a TV series. For a film, it might not make much sense because you're going to be working with only 1.5 hours. But if you've got a TV series that comes out with I don't know how many episodes. I recently finished watching Vikings, the TV series, which was God knows how many episodes. And I thought, well, if I don't do it now under COVID restrictions that I cannot leave my house, when am I going to do it? So I did manage, survive it. And there I could see how important it will be to have glossaries, to have information that will help us to speed up our translation, that will refresh my memory of what have I translated it with expressions that I translated before that I might not remember, and I don't want to go back fishing into all my documents to see whether I can find it. So having those sort of documents, having that sort of information available at our fingertips, I think will help manage that intercultural translation. There is a risk. Sorry.
Just, just to tell her that Deborah, she's the translator of Vikings here for dubbing.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. So that's why I saw. Okay, okay. Well done. You survived it, as me.
Yes, professor, I did survive it.
Yeah,
Only those who went through the process knows.
yeah. But it's more and more. It's happening more and more. So somehow films seem to have fallen off grace, and now everybody wants to do TV series and lots of episodes and so on. So that for us is a different kettle of fish to be working with, and we need to come up with new tools and new strategies to be able to work to the best of our abilities, and the little time that we've got here. I do criticize and I always complain, and every time that I can I raise the issue. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to me that a director that has spent years creating a film then will require that very same film to be translated in 3 days or in 1 week. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I don't think directors sometimes realize what is happening there because of the way the industry works. A director finishes her film, and then they just leave it in the hands of the producers that start looking around and blah blah. And they know that sometimes the translation is done under conditions that are not the best ones to do justice to their films, on which they've been investing lots of money, lots of times, lots of energy, and years of their lives. And I think this is a battle that we really need to be fighting a lot more, beyond the translators, beyond the language service providers, and beyond the large corporations. And we need to go to the creators to make sure that they really are aware on how these things are done, and whether we can gain their support and their help to make sure that they ask as well for decent working conditions so that we can do decent translation of their products. But this is a challenge that we discuss quite often among certain companies, and I think everybody is somehow aware of these little challenges, but it takes a while to get them changed and to move in the right direction. So I'm afraid that one is, we have to try and use technology, new devices, new tools to see whether we can make our work a little bit easier and faster. But I'm afraid we would always have to be dealing with intercultural translation and new things that are new. And that's why I guess translation becomes so exciting. And we continue to talk about translation because it doesn't matter how much prepared you are, then you've got COVID, and then there's all this jargon and all these new things that are totally new, they didn't exist, and then we have to start coining new terms and translating and making sure that everybody understands what we're saying. And that's the nature of human communication, not just translation. So I think it's good for us as well, because we will be here for a long time, for many years to come.
Indeed. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you.
So let's see now a few questions where you were touching a bit more on translators. Yeah. And this one here, would be the best way to deal with the so common statements, oh, your rates are too high. We have people in our staff who speak English, Spanish, French, whatever, and who can do the same for free or a much lower price. Now, I've already talked and discussed the expletives and the swearing in my first question. So probably the first thing that will come from me will be one of those to tell to this person, what the fuck do you think you're talking about when you think that, anybody can do it for free? And yes, there is this feeling sometimes in Spain is the same, the brother of the guy or the lady in charge of whatever, went to Britain for 3 weeks, and that person could probably do it because they've been there 3 weeks, they know what it's all about, and they can do it. And we know that that is not really the way it's done. I would like to believe that there aren't too many people that think that it can be done just for free and just on the fly. Although it's true that sometimes it feels that it's far too many people that are that they take that sort of approach. And I believe it's not just unique in translation. I think, you know, I talk to a lot of people, for instance, photographers, journalists. Now anybody can write 2 lines in Twitter, and then they advertise themselves as being journalists or influencers or whatever you want to call them, and not much more preparation is needed than that. So in that sense, I think it's a lot of educating people to realize that, you know, it takes a lot more that probably they understand, and it's more challenging. I was, to give you an idea, I was recently invited by the BBC for a radio program because one of the radio listeners sent a question, and it was, oh, how do they do the subtitles? Because I'm watching the telly and I can see the subtitles appearing there and then. And who is doing those? Are they done by a machine or somebody there? And how can they be so fast? That was the question. And then they contacted me and I said, well, yes, I assume you're talking about intralingual subtitles, English into English, which are usually for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And then we have special programs and blah, blah, blah. And I only took about 5 minutes before the interview because they wanted to know whether I was available. And then the lady said, oh dear, we didn't realize it was that complicated. That sounds really fascinating. All the things, and you've got proper software that is specific for subtitling, and then you do all the things. Blimey, I never thought it was such an industry. So it shows you, it comes to show how ignorant people can be of something that they give for granted because it's available every day, and on every screen they're watching they can see there. So I'm afraid, again, we will have to do a little bit more of education, educating clients, and make sure that they fully understand what is that we are doing, and for a profession to be like this and to be sustainable, then it has to be done with the right professionals and so on. I can assure you that there is now quite a bit of a movement here to make sure that these clients and that sort of approach is snubbed by other people, and they are, you know, criticized in a way that made them understand that that's not really the way forward in our industry. I'm now in the equator of the presentation here with question number 5. And this is the one that I sort of referred earlier on. In your latest presentation at Tradac, which was this Italian gathering, you mentioned something you called talent crunch, and said it's been difficult for companies to find well-prepared talents. You also talked about rates and how they have lowered throughout the years. Is there a direct relationship between low rates and such difficulty in finding talent nowadays? Wouldn't it lead us to the contrary movement, not many talents, then higher rates? And I think this is a very clever question as well as the other ones. In how or why is this happening? Um, it's been quite common, and it wasn't just me. There is this monitoring agency is called Slater. They're based in Switzerland, and there is another one called Common Sense Advisory, is another monitoring body based in the USA. Another one called NIMZ, also in the USA, and what they do is monitor the industry, the translation industry, and they take the pulse of what is going on, companies selling or companies buying new technology, and anything that they think is topical. That's their remit. You can access them for free. You can register for free, and then they send you a digest, which is what I do, and I keep abreast of new things happening, and particularly in the audiovisual world, because it's so much at the same time. And it was a couple of years ago, it was July 2017, where this idea of talent crunch was being discussed. And ever since, quite a few companies have been raising the same issue that media localization, now that Amazon is all over the place and Netflix particularly, and then Disney Plus. This is before Disney Plus, but now with Disney Plus, HBO, and many other cloud-based platforms, companies were struggling to find talent. I would imagine in some territories, as they call them, in some countries, they were struggling more than in others. I can tell you, for instance, that in the Far East, which is heavily populated and is a very attractive market for these companies that operate throughout the world, virtually no universities in Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Cambodia, Burma, nobody teaches audiovisual translation. No universities have taken it up, not even in India, which has got over 1 billion people living there. So if you took it from that perspective, yes, there are many, many language combinations where there aren't enough people to be translating all these programs. In other languages, there might be more people and so on. But the general idea or the general complaint is that there aren't enough. And one of the companies, one of the largest corporations, for instance, they said as one example that, when you want to start working for the industry, most companies will have an um, um, entry test. So they will test you on something. So usually they give you a clip, they will ask you to translate, or they might give you some exercises to condense the information. They vary slightly, but chances are that you're gonna be tested. And
Perfect.
one of these companies said that only 10% of the people taking the test actually pass it. And that's why they were complaining that, their failure rate is so high that it's difficult to get new people into the industry. Yeah. And that again has led a consortium of companies to create what is known as the pool, with three O's there. And again, you've got the reference, which is basically is a new directory, and it's been created with over 25 companies behind this initiative. It's a directory for professionals working in the audiovisual localization industry. Again, taking that idea that if there aren't enough people out there, let's try to create some hub, a place where people can advertise their services, and where people needing translators, audiovisual translators. This is not any type of translators, but it's audiovisual translators. And then when you register, it's free. You can register and offer your services, and then they will tell you you can do subtitling, or you can do dubbing, or you can do accessibility, or you can do a voice talent, or whatever. But this is as a sort of reaction to that narrative that there aren't enough people available out there working in our field. So that is what I was referring to. Yes, it begs then the question, if there aren't enough, shouldn't the rates be higher? And this is something that some of the companies are trying to arrange. And you might be familiar, a few years back, for instance, Netflix created their own testing platform, which was called Hermes. And it
Yeah.
was a test that they produced to see who were the best people around,
Mm-hmm.
so that
Mm-hmm.
then they could use the top-notch people to do the better paid job, and the programs that they feel mix exquisite quality, and then have other people where probably the quality doesn't need to be I don't know, it doesn't need to be um, Harrods in the UK, which is Harrods in the UK is the top
Uh-huh.
um, department store, but it could
Mhm.
be more like Asda, where they also sell things, but it's far less developed and so on. So they
Mhm.
started to, or they wanted to create a tier on best subtitlers that we know they are the best ones because we've tested them. Then we can pay them more and then
Mhm.
see whether we sit in there. So I think this is the drive that we're going to see happening more and more, if the industry is serious about keeping talent working here. They will have to keep going up with the rates, or at least keep with inflation, and make sure
Mhm.
that the best people are paid decently so that they can live in the industry. And I do know that recently, one of the fastest growing companies in the world in subtitling, based in Sweden. They raised rates, which had been stagnant for quite a few years, and now they've decided that they're increasing and they're looking for that. So yes, hopefully that sort of misconception or that sort of um, anachronism that, you know,
Mhm.
if there are enough people, shouldn't you pay more? Maybe
Mhm.
that will start change a little bit to make sure that, you know, the best people are coming here. I cannot tell you a lot more with certain companies. I've signed sometimes this non-disclosure agreements. I cannot say many things, but I do know that some of the biggest players in the world are really concerned about quality. And they're trying to come up with initiatives that will help them boost the quality, best translators, and hence they are aware that they will have to pay more.
Professor, so they're trying to not only attract talents, but retain them, right?
And retain them as well, yeah, because that is one of the things, you know, it's not that they only take the newcomers. For some companies only 10% that pass the test, but also that some of the ones that are really experienced, that have been working here in this field for many years, they find that they probably earned more money doing other types of translation, and they are relinquishing or working less in audiovisual translation. And that is also a tragedy for the industry, because it is not that you're losing the talent, but it also means that you have to train new people. And when you're training new people, you're wasting resources, you're wasting time, you're wasting effort until those people are at a very good level to be productive and to have the quality that you want. It doesn't matter, you know, companies have their own quality criteria. So you might be an excellent translator, but you still need to adapt to the
Yeah,
quality that a certain company wants.
you're
And
right.
you learn
Yeah.
to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
if once you've learned, and it takes time to the companies, and they need to give you feedback and send you material, if by the time you know, then you think, well, actually I'm not earning a living here and I'm leaving, so that is doubly bad for the company. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you're leaving, but also they spend all this money and time preparing you, and now you're
Yeah.
leaving.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is one of the things that the companies are now realizing, that it doesn't make much sense operating on those premises.
Very good news. Thank you, Jorge.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Productivity. So related to that, you know, any tips on how to improve it? And I'm not sure if you are familiar what sort of parameters we use for productivity. Usually, in written translation, we always know that to be productive, somebody professionally speaking will do maybe 2.5, 3,000 words per day. That is being a very standard concept all around. You know, if you're working as a full-time translator, you might do round about 3,000 words. Sometimes you do a bit more, sometimes you do a little bit less, but that helps you to see, if I do 3,000 and I charge X per thousand, then can I make a living working in this industry and so on. Not so much has been discussed or studied in the field of audiovisual translation. And we don't know how much people do generally. There are a few things, but not that common. So from my knowledge and what I've been learning and hearing from people and so on, you know, I've been living in the UK for a long time. I came before 1990. Just 1 year before that I landed in London for 9 months, and that was quite a few decades ago. I never left this city. It was a little bit addictive. And at that time, when I started working with people in the industry, when, you know, the DVD hadn't even been invented, never mind the streaming platforms and so on. People working in the industry with a piece of software developed for subtitling, they will probably do around 20 minutes with the spotting. So that was SDH. That was the main thing that they were doing in the UK at the time, because the DVD hadn't arrived, as I said. It was only with the DVD that then translating across languages became so important and so monumentally big in the industry. But until then, in the UK, it was fairly quiet on that front, and people were doing lots of SDH, subtitling for deaf and hard of hearing, and in 8 hours, they will probably do the spotting of 20 minutes. Now, it's quite easy to do round about double that. 35, 40 minutes spotting is pretty standard with the technology, with the resources that we have. And I'm sure you're familiar on working spotting, but also working with templates, which is they give us already the technical dimension is being done. And then I'm going to keep working at my translation. Again, it varies if you're doing a documentary, which is probably very dense in terms of content, and then you might need to document yourself and find lots of references and so on. Might take you a bit longer than if you are doing an action film when there is only a few dialogue and not much more information is being there. But usually you will hear some professional people saying that, you know, they might do around about 50 subtitles per hour. That's what they find themselves doing, depending. You know, sometimes you do more, sometimes you do less, but that is a benchmark that they sometimes use to make sure that they can deal with the work done by other people. So against this background and these sort of ideas, um, you know, you can speed up your translations. For instance, working with you know, new technology that is going to be you know, helping you to fasten your delivery in there. I always, you know, when I teach my students at the beginning, I always tell them, you know, uh, time is money. And any time that you get your fingers out of your keyboard, you're wasting money when you're doing subtitles. And then you should be really, you know, touch typing if you can. I cannot myself. I'm too old now with too many bad habits to retrain myself. But I know that, you know, if you can touch type and you don't need to be looking at your keyboard, if you have got your short changes and your keyboard done in such a way that you can manipulate your video at the same time and so on, that is what is going to make the little difference in your work. That's what is going to allow you to do maybe 50 or 60 subtitles per hour, or produce a little few more minutes per program per day. And I will be showing you a little bit some of that technology in there. This is one question that you didn't ask me, but I was asked when I was working or when I did something similar for Peru. And what do we as translators play? What role do we play when it comes to inclusive language to promote gender equality? You know, do we do anything? Can we do anything? You know, we're talking, I'm not sure in Portuguese. In Spanish, we are now talking, we are exactly the same Latin language as you, with feminine, masculine, people that don't want to say their gender, but the language is heavily inflected and so on. So we're trying to find ways. The Swedish, for instance, they invented a new pronoun that they didn't exist. It didn't exist. They call it hun, and hun is not he, is not she, is it. But they never had it in Swedish. It was something new that they created so that they will cope with these sort of issues. Now, for us, it's a little bit challenging because we're working on something that is being done. But you've got quite a few initiatives now where people, for instance, the way we do it, and I'm sure you follow the message here in Spanish. I had thought about taking part, and I received a message from a friend. A friend in English is neutral. I don't know if he was a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but in Spanish, I will have to take a decision. What what's that? And what they've done in this one, for instance, is go for an X, which hides the gender of the person that is speaking. And we are finding we're finding ourselves using it more and more. We also use sometimes this amigos as you know, the ending in Spanish for masculine is O, for feminine is A. So with the at, it sort of covers both. Some people don't like it because it leaves transgender people that don't want to assimilate to feminine or masculine is still out of the equation. And that's why they use the X. But the X makes it really impossible to pronounce, you know, because how do you pronounce that in Spanish, you know? So I can write it, but I find myself in the problem there of working that way. And then you get, sometimes they might go a little bit too much in one direction. So this is my opinion. Maybe I am wrong. And wrong here, they've got an X, but it's this lady talking. So I don't know if she doesn't want to assign herself to feminine, or whether they've taken this policy a little bit too much, too far uh, down the line to make any sense when you're seeing the images. Um, I'll show you here a little clip that I like on the power of gender issues linked to the first question that we saw at the beginning, which was swearing.
Pretty. Pretty.
Sorry, and do take a look before I go on. Do take a look at the subtitles. You can see already.
What the fuck? I'm not some pretty fucking helpless princess in distress. I'm pretty fucking powerful and ready for success. So what is more offensive? A little girl saying fuck, or the fucking unequal and sexist way society treats girls
So you've got
and
there
women.
breaking all these stereotypes. They're trying. We've got these little girls, princesses, of course, all pink behind, and they're trying to break all these gender stereotypes with the use of fuck. Yeah, but the subtitles, what they've done here is all the opposite. They seem to be ashamed of using that type of jargon or vocabulary, and then what we can see in all the subtitles is all these groxleys, which what is called, I think I've got it written there, that's what it's called in English, grolics, yeah, which is distorting the language in such a way that you can guess what it's saying, but not quite. And you probably will see that more often in comics and things like that. So that is the way, and it's rather than being, you know, helping in this fight against stereotyping girls in the wrong sort of roles, what they're doing is fighting against that. So it's not really bringing this message further down the line when it comes into Spanish in there, unless you know the English. When it became much more new, much more standard was with the series Pose by Fox, where they were actually asking translators, and I would imagine that it was the same in Brazilian Portuguese, that this series needed to be in inclusive language. Yeah, and what we did in Spanish, the way they dealt with this was, for instance, La Reina de Todes is not todos, is not todas. You need to pronounce it because they're going to be talking as well. So we use the E to make it feminine, masculine, and anybody that it can be included in there. Yeah? So we can see that more and more this is happening, that some people are making it much more streamlined and much more mainstream. And I know that certain corporations do have quite a big you know, uh, they do care quite a lot on how language is used to be perceived by younger generations as the right platform for them to be watching, because they know they're going to be watching things that they want to watch and that are relating to their daily routine when they go out on the streets, or what they relate to their friends and so on. So that was a little bit on that. So the industry. How has the AVT industry been affected by the pandemic? You know, have we seen anything happening? And of course, everybody has been affected. That's why we are having this chat today online and in the distance, which has been probably one of the beauties that, you know, we can all see each other irrespective of where we are all located. It probably has the downside. You know, I would probably prefer to be in Buzios with Deborah giving you a talk there. So it doesn't work both ways, but it allows us to do new things in many other areas. And of course, AVT hasn't been any different, and it has also been affected by that. One of the things that we've seen, for instance, is we've gone to the cloud. And everything is being now done through the cloud. Technology is all up there somewhere, which is not really up there, is in one of the deserts in the USA usually, but we've been sold this metaphor of being in the cloud, big computers based in the USA most of the time, where everything is stored. And that's what we've been working for quite a bit, but now with the pandemic, this has become a lot more common in subtitling mostly, but also in dubbing, which we thought it was going to be much more challenging. It's been really fastly developing in that direction. What we found as well is that the production of audiovisual content, it has somehow stopped. There aren't as many films, TV series that are being produced or created because clearly we cannot mix with each other and so on. And that has driven many companies to look for other material, either material that they had in old catalogs, old films, old TV series, old documentaries that they were somewhere lost there. So they've been trying to look for them and bringing them to enhance their catalog and their offer, and also looking for material in other languages that weren't done before. So we're finding now more and more other language combinations and other material readily available. This has been going on for a little bit as well. This is not just the pandemic, but again, the pandemic has helped to accelerate. Now, Netflix has been thinking for a few years now that everybody's going to be watching foreign language content, and it's not going to be, yes, even English-speaking Americans are going to be watching things in other languages, and we're going to be spreading the world in other languages as well. And that's why they've moved their narrative to be talking about more storytelling, and they want storytelling from any part of the world that is going to be important, and it can be bringing in new audiences. Just recently, and that was a few days back, Netflix will spend 500 million in South Korea, South Korean productions this year. So if you speak Korean, you probably are in a good position to be translating for Netflix. But how many people around the world speak speak Korean to be working professionally and so on? And this is something that is another challenge for the industry. We know that we're getting more. Netflix discovered that one of the biggest selling TV series was this one here, Dark, which is German, but also the Spanish one, La Casa de Papel, which is also been a big thing in the world. Another is a Brazilian one that somebody told me the other day. I think is a lady, which is a detective. That is also making the waves in the UK at least. I don't remember. I think it was the name of the lady. That was the name of the series. And I think it's Sonia Braga. Could it be Sonia Braga, the main character? But anyway, so it is.
Sorry, Professor.
Yep.
Jorge, Deborah
Yeah.
here. Yeah, is it Good Morning, Veronica?
Yes, Veronica. Yeah, that's the one.
Does anybody know the name of the actress? I don't remember now by heart.
Okay.
But it's not Sonia Braga, yeah, but Good Morning, Veronica is what you're referring to, Professor.
Yes, that's the one that I'm referring to. Yeah, that somebody told me the other day, and now everybody's sort of watching here in the UK, and it's becoming really something to watch. So I've got it on my to watch list. Now that I finished Vikings, I can move on with my life and watch other things as well. But then, particularly in Europe, this is a big thing as well, because they say that two pieces of news are better understood if they are together. So in Europe, there's always been this fear that we are being colonized by English productions. I won't say just from the USA, but usually English productions. And now that the UK is not part of the European Union, even more so, because it is the USA and Britain and so on. And the European Union as such, 26 countries in the European Union have already come up with an audiovisual media service directive. And this is making now companies like Netflix, like HBO or Disney, they won't be able to operate in European soil unless their productions, unless their catalog contains at least a third, 30% of their offer is European works. So that means that Netflix, if all they have to offer is American films, sorry, they cannot operate in here. The same for HBO or Amazon Prime or whoever who wants to operate. And that's why many of these platforms are now producing TV series and films in other languages to make sure that they're not going to lose their potential revenue that they can create here in Europe. HBO recently, they've never done it before, but just a year or so ago, they produced their first ever TV series in Italian, in another language other than English, and it was Italian, based on a book by Elena Ferrante. So that is the way it's going, and that's what we are seeing that it's going to happen more and more. So how are we going to be translating? Now I know, for instance, in Spain, Turkish TV soap operas are becoming really, really popular. My mom is hooked on one. And when I talk to her every other day, she's always watching it and she loves it and blah, blah, blah. We never watched Turkish TV soap operas, telenovelas. It usually was either Brazilian or Latin American. But now it's a new market. It's something new that people are, they just tried in Spain. And to their surprise, they've been hugely popular. So that is what we're going to see more and more, this mix of languages, and how are we going to be dealing with those, and how are we going to be working with those. Are we going to be using always English as a pivot language to translate Korean into English and then into Brazilian Portuguese? We know that there were quite a few problems with, for instance, the translation of parasite. If somebody's saying você in Brazilian Portuguese and I translate into English you, and then I translate from there into Finnish, what do I do? Are they friends? Are they lovers? Don't they know each other? Are they polite? Are they impolite? Are they formal, informal? The you doesn't tell me anything. And we will lose all those things. So this is one of the challenges that we have ahead for us. Do you feel, question number 9, just nearly there in here, do you feel like audiovisual translation has reached a point where there are a set of rules that everyone must follow? Or is it still a new field that can evolve and create its own standard, depending on the material that we are working with? How flexible would you say this field of work is compared to much older professions, such as engineering, for example? I think in here, if we know a little bit of how we have been evolving, it helps us to contextualize what is happening now. And I think we have evolved, and particularly because more and more subtitling is so common and we see it everywhere, that people are now expecting things to be done in a particular way. So traditionally, what we had was lots of companies that were fragmented. They weren't as big as they are these days because there wasn't that much money being produced. And then they kept everything for themselves. They didn't want to share with other people. So we had standards, rules that were very fragmented and changed a lot according to people. And there were some associations, like for instance, the European Association for Studies in Screen Translation, which is one of the first ones ever created in the world to deal with audiovisual translation, that we're trying to do what you're asking me in this question, to create a set of rules that will be for good quality. And is what is known, and still is around there, is the good subtitling standards. Yeah. Then what it happened is that companies started to be less cagey about their material. Netflix came along, and then Netflix make all their guidelines, all their material available on the internet. And it has two effects. On the one hand, it is, okay, here you can learn, you can see what we're doing. We're not afraid. We're not hiding it as companies were doing before. But then it sort of becomes the de facto guidelines, because I know now many teachers, because they don't have guidelines from companies, because companies are reluctant to give that sort of information, but they say, okay, well, I'll go to Netflix and I can see here Brazilian Portuguese or Czech or Danish, up to 33 languages, and I can use them. And I'm going to be teaching new generations on how to do it, not generally, but how to do it as Netflix wants this to be. And that in itself might have some challenges, that we are giving so much power, and we're going to be molded in consuming subtitles the way that Netflix likes it. And against this globalization that, you know, we are doing things in one. I think we still have, as the question was asking here, are we more flexible than that? There are still more things that we can do. And I think there are. It doesn't have to be just one way. And what we're finding now is the opposite trend that some people call globalization, no global as in global for the world, but local as localization in one place, globalization forces. And then what we're finding is, for instance, in Europe, we've got the AVTE, which is Audiovisual Translators Europe. And it is an association of associations. In Europe, we have developed lots of associations for audiovisual translators in the UK, Sweden, Norway, Croatia, Czech Republic, Spain, Portugal, Germany. Virtually in every country, there is one association which is only for audiovisual translators. And what they are doing, because they're not completely happy with what Netflix has to say about subtitles, is that they are creating guidelines in different languages, the languages for their own countries. And they are proposing those as well for people who want to use for teaching or for standards that you could use in languages, and taking into consideration the experience, the history of those countries. Yeah, so we're finding that it's not clear cut, that it's not just, we're not going to this sort of world that is only one way and we all do the same and it's a bit totalitarian, but you can also hear other people that say, no, we don't like that, and we propose other guidelines and other standards that should also be applied. I know, for instance, the Portuguese are working on their guidelines and also the English ones. They're not there, but the idea is that all of these guidelines will be uploaded and give another voice of dissent or the difference to guidelines that appear to be much more globalized these days on Netflix. And I think this is probably my last question, apart from something else that I will tell you about the future and so on. But this was number 10, which makes a nice round number here. How do you see the future of subtitling with the increasing use of automatic translation tools by subtitling clients? Do you think it's for the better, or will it soon become an excuse for paying low fees and for hiring unqualified personnel? Now, this is a very tricky question, tricky situation, and tricky answer that we can come up with, because everybody seems to be enchanted by automated translation or artificial intelligence, which sounds even better because it's intelligent. You know, we know the machine translation can be a bit stupid and doesn't recognize certain things, whereas artificial intelligence lets us into this false idea that things are intelligent when we know that everybody's testing, and we know that machines sometimes are not that intelligent themselves. You'll be surprised that when you talk to companies, and I do go to many meetings where representatives for companies come, not just academics, but there are bodies like MESA in Britain, which is for entertainment companies and so on, and they had a meeting a couple of days ago. You've got Gala, you've got the EGA, Entertainment Association, and Entertainment Globalization Association, which has been created recently with many companies. And then they ask some of them, many large corporations, many companies, they don't use machine translation. They don't think it's helping them to do it. And they're testing, they're seeing how it goes. But when it comes to workflows, many of them, they're still not quite using them. So there's a lot more that is being said, there's a lot more that is being discussed than is actually being done in real time. So that's one thing, for us to lose that fear that, you know, oh God, they're here and we're going to lose our jobs. No, it's still a long way to go. And even companies that are trying to help, they can see the limitations there. Some companies, for instance, Netflix, will prefer to talk about assisted translation. They're going to help you as much as they can, with as much information as they can for you to do your translation properly, but they're not going to insist on machine translation. They think that what they have seen in machine translation, it doesn't make sense. And for some people, they understand that it doesn't speed you up. If anything, it drags you down. It makes you waste your time. And they're asking people, well, don't use it. Just ignore it and don't use it. I was the other day talking to somebody in one meeting, somebody from Russia, and he was being sent translations that were machine translated for him to revise. And then he said, well, it's really great because I'm getting being paid more than when I do the translation, because I told them, sorry, I can't do this and let you pay more because this is rubbish. It's really bad and I have to change everything. But because they're testing and they want to see what is going on in this, okay, we'll pay you more. We want to see and understand what is happening here because we don't think we can apply this normally. So there's a long way to go. But there is, to give you an idea, in terms of statistics, for instance, you know, every day only YouTube. We're not talking about any other platforms in the world. 5 billion videos are being watched. So everything is becoming audiovisual all the time. We watch 3,250, 3,250 million hours of programs on YouTube. And every minute, 300 hours of video are being uploaded to YouTube. So even if everybody in the world was a subtitler, even if all you over 100 million Brazilians that you are were subtitling, we just couldn't subtitle what is being produced. We're producing audiovisual material as if there is no tomorrow. And that's why it explains why some companies are looking so much into machine translation, not because they want to do the job that we are doing now, but mostly because they can see that this growth is so exponential that without some sort of technology, we're not going to be able to cope with that. And we do know, for instance, that a lot of information on the internet is audiovisual. People are watching that. And that's why companies want to say, okay, I want to sell something, I want to reach people, I want to have as many subtitles as possible in my text, because everybody's watching this. 80% by 2019, 80% of the traffic on the internet was audiovisual. So that is a lot of material that is being circulating, and that's why some companies are thinking about, if we could translate some of these things, that would be great. But of course, we cannot do it with human beings. It has to be with machines, because some of these things are not even important to be translated for consumption, as we do a film or a TV series. So that is on the side there. And then also in the industry, we've moved now, you see there that sort of circle, move on to video on demand, which is what we are living now in 2016, all these OTT distributors and so on. And this is the evolution that is expected for 2023, is on the increase. This was done obviously before 2017, when the pandemic wasn't around. We've discovered that from 2019-20, the pandemic has provoked that more people are watching things and so on. So this is the habit that they were already anticipating on watching platforms on demand, not TVs, not the television, but platform on demand. And this is a very healthy industry that is going to be increasing and pushing the numbers of people watching and the products that we need to translate for different markets and different people. And here is what we are moving now to the cloud. And this is one of the areas that I think will help us, or has the potential of helping us, where we can create material. This is from one platform that is called Una. You can go to the platform and you can actually use the platform for free. I think they allow you 10 days or 2 weeks that you can play and see what they do. But you can create your subtitles. You can also translate, and I'll show you that, but you've got a template, and then you can easily start your translation. You can also review the work of somebody else in a very neat environment, and you can also burn and encode. You can burn the subtitles on the clip itself. That's something that we could never do with any subtitling programs that we install on our computers. And they look a little bit like this. This is what I think, not what I think, what I know companies are developing, and what is going to be the future for us subtitlers. We're going to have an environment that is going to be looking like that. We're going to have a template here. Sometimes maybe a translation is being volunteered from your machine for your memory tool, and then you might have some information there that you might want to use or disregard. Then you will see here you can leave comments to people to learn there, or information that the creator of the program tells you what watch out, here is a play on words, the references to a black comedian from the 60s that was very popular in Indianapolis, and then you should be recreating blah, blah, blah. So all that information that will speed up your process, you still need to be creative, but you've got all that there to be helping you in the process. And this is what I think is where we are going to be looking into. And then, as I mentioned to you, there are many platforms now to do subtitles. There are not that many platforms to do dubbing. And I thought of Gilma when I was working on this. So I've given you here two of the platforms that are now developing this. When we talk about artificial intelligence, we're also talking a lot about speech recognition. And that is why there is so much interest now in things like dubbing, voiceover, audio description, because we're always playing with voice and sounds. So again, you've got here Zoo Dubs, which again, there you've got the information. They're based in the UK, and then Voice Q, they're based in New Zealand, in Auckland. And then there's another platform where they are developed mainly for dubbing. And then you do dubbing in the cloud, and then you can be doing your revoicing in Sao Paulo, in Rio de Janeiro, or in Buzios, and then the companies in the USA, in Spain, or in New Zealand. Yeah, and that's the idea. That is the way that they think the future is going to be moving into. And then with that one, I'll finish, and I'll try to give you a little bit what is in the future for us. Well, a lot more of work and a lot more on accessibility. Nobody asked for accessibility, so I haven't really touched on this, but subtitle for the deaf and hard of hearing, audio description for the blind. These are areas that are bound to be evolving. Now, we talk about a lot about translation, and we don't really know much on what people are doing. So somebody, Blanca Arias, is a researcher from Spain, and then she went to a conference in Argentina, ISPATAF. I think it was a year ago, or maybe less than a year ago, because the data is from November 2020, so not that long ago. And then what she did was look into some of the biggest players in Spain on demand video platforms, and she was taking a look at what they were doing. And you can see here that yes, subtitling is being quite used in many places, but still, look, Netflix, where they say, you know, they want to be fully inclusive and translate laws, is still, you know, very little to the potential that they could do in Spain in subtitling. And some of the platforms filming, they're not doing anything for audio description, anything for the deaf and hard of hearing, or anything like that. And these are areas that, at least in Europe, are going to be regulated by the European Union. So they will have to develop, and they will have to create much more translation, much more initiatives will have to be channeled into making the productions widely available in more languages, but also widely available for people with sensory disabilities, whether they are blind or whether they are deaf, and being produced there. So that is something that is going to happen more and more. And what is going to be happening, and I know that companies are now looking into that, is this multiplicity of languages. It's not going to be, a few years back, I knew it was, you know, if you were a translator in the audiovisual world, if you didn't have English, you were lost, and English was the language to translate. Now, more and more, we're finding lots of other languages that are coming into the equation, and it's going to make a much more plural environment, where we will have to hone other linguistic skills in our field. So I think that's all I wanted to say. I said that I was going to be for an hour, but I always speak more than I should. So I hope you can bear with me for this, and muito obrigado.
Professor Jorge, sorry. While you were speaking, we had many people participating in the chat, always saying, "Oh, that's a relief," when you mentioned the question of tools substituting us. This is not something.
No.
This is not something that will happen, and people, "Ooh, that's a relief," and
Yeah.
you know.
I think
Yes.
I'll try to put it in a little perspective. You know, imagine you've got a company, and then you want to be trendy, and then you want to go to the European Union to get funding, or you want to go to a company, a larger body to go to get funding. So if you say, but listen, I can do something, I can produce this technology that is going to allow you to communicate in, I will communicate to you in English and you will hear to me in Portuguese, and then you talk to me in Portuguese and I can hear you in English. I thought, wow.
Yeah.
And then they give them money. The reality is that you cannot do that. It doesn't work. It's full of fraud and it's not getting anywhere. But for some people, the idea is very attractive. You think, oh, that would be great if we could do that. Why don't we put a little bit of money and then see what's happening there? It's the same as sending people to Mars. You know, it's much more
Yeah.
interesting to give money to go to Mars than to give me money to go on holidays to Brazil. So if I say, can you give me money to go to Brazil? They say, well, no. But if you say, oh, we'll go to Mars and find things. Oh, yes, that's
Oh yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So that's what we are finding in our field as well. There is a lot of hoo-ha, a lot of information. Oh, this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
believe me, we're still miles away to be doing things that are going to take us away from the work. Still, many people that deal with the translation are very skeptical. They say, well, it's not really helping us. And we don't see how this is going to be helping us in a few years. And those are the ones from the BBC, from Channel 4, from Spanish television that need to be translating, and they consider that they're going to be translating for many more years with human beings and maybe helping a little bit with the technology, but not what other people are trying to tell us that it's going to be automatic. You just press a button, voila, done. No, it's not going to happen.
Professor Jorge again. I'll never be able to thank you enough, and I'm going to repeat that forever. For
My
being
pleasure.
here, for bringing us a glimpse of the future, and confirming many of the things we have been telling our colleagues, students, who have been sharing throughout our studies. And now Gilma is going to say thank you again. And
Sure.
I hope we can meet soon with that agua de coco you mentioned.
Hey, that will be, yeah, I'm in for that.
All right. Thank you.
Especially in Búzios, right, Jorge?
Sorry?
Especially in Búzios.
In Bucius, yeah. I
Right?
was there once, so I'd love to go back again.
Yeah,
So
you
yeah.
welcome. I've
I
told you
know, I
many times
know.
about that. You can come to Rio, be with
Yeah,
us,
that'd be
and
lovely.
well, I really loved seeing you again. A long time, right?
It
And
has been a while.
yeah,
Yeah, I know.
but
Gone are the days, São João do Rio Preto,
yeah,
that
no,
we were there as well. Yeah.
yeah, many years we had fun there, right? Well,
Yeah. Good
in the name
memories always from Brazil. Always.
so in the name of Estrada, right? Our school and everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming to listen to you. And well, what else? Thank you so much. Que muchas gracias. ¿Sí? Espero verte muy
Obrigadinho.
pronto.
Obrigadinho.
¿Sí? Espero verte muy pronto.
I hope so.
All right.
Okay, well, I'll leave you here then. All the very best to everyone. Time for me to go to bed.
Yeah.
Although I
Yeah.
am a night owl. I won't go to bed straight away. I'm a night owl. But it's been lovely talking to you, and I hope we will cross our pathways sooner rather than later, and we will be able to hug again and be
Yes.
close to each other. Yeah,
Yes. We hope
hopefully.
so.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Hey.
Beijos.
Beijos,
Yes,
beijos. Tchau,
beijos.
tchau.
Ciao.